Hey everyone, in this video I show you advanced level designs that I use for my Miro flowchart to design my AI assistant like this one on my website. This is part 3 of my tutorial. If you haven't seen the other two, I suggest you start there. And with that said, let's get going. Alright, so here we are again with the board as we left off in part 2. And today we are going to change 5 more things to make this design really stand out and really professional. The first thing is that we're going to take a look at the overall macro design. How are the big blocks laid out? Does that make sense? And how should we change that? The second thing we take a look at is the micro design or design in the detail, where we'll take a look at the individual elements, the ratios, the spacing, and how these all should be to really look perfect. The third thing is that we'll take these macro and micro considerations into account and with them actually create the new flowchart. And there's a lot of rearranging, so it's actually easier to just create a new one from scratch. Then the fourth thing we'll do is change the coloring and make it look more professional and less rainbowish as this one is right now. And the fifth thing we'll do is add some final touches, like for example footnotes. Alright, so let's jump into the first step and talk about macro planning. If you think about this flowchart as it looks right now, I think you can divide it into 3 parts. That's kind of an introductory part here on the left. Then we have kind of a main body part, which is these 4 blocks here. And we have an exit block, which is this one down here. And this L shape that goes from left to right and then down, in the first impression it makes sense because you move from top left to bottom right, and that's actually okay. But overall, first going right and then going down doesn't really have a clear purpose. So that's something I'd like to avoid. And now we have 2 options to do that. The first option is that we move all the way from left to right and basically move that exit block over here to the right. Or the other option is that we put this start block up here. So everything flows top down. And then these 4 are still left to right, but that's okay because they are a hierarchy level lower. They're all kind of part of the body block, if you will. And for me, in this case, the top-down logic is more clear because the blocks here, these 4 among themselves, have some interactions as well. And if we have all along a horizontal orientation, we'll have issues with these arrows coming in. Like we'll need to have arrows going on top and arrows coming out on the bottom and then up again. So you have a lot of unnecessary corners. So basically what we'll do to solve this issue is move all these up here. I'll just do it really simply right now. This of course looks more crappy than before, but we'll fix that. So, and with that, I would say the macro situation is resolved because overall it flows top down, these flow left to right. Then individually they flow mostly top to bottom, which is also great because these kind of blocks are more broad than they're high. So yeah, when in doubt, it's better to go top down rather than left right to be more compact. And I think the macro situation is quite good with that. Then let's talk about micro planning. And when I talk about micro planning, there are a lot of details we can consider here. If we look at any random block here, let's just take one block that I have here randomly. The proportion of this block, they are sort of just assigned by drafting. Like I just took this shape and clicked here and just randomly made something that has roughly the shape that I want to have. But actually, there are proportions that look better than others. And like you can intuitively say that if it's more high than it's wide, that will look weird, right? Usually it's also not a square. I mean, in the case of an app, you might use a square, but usually for text, it's more wide, more broad than is high. And there are proportions that match especially well. And for that, we'll use the golden ratio. And to always achieve the golden ratio for these blocks and also between blocks, as you'll see, there is a brilliant trick, and that is to always use the Fibonacci numbers for all height and width values. And I'll not go into technical detail here why the Fibonacci numbers achieve that, but I'll just quickly put in a ChatGPT answer that explains that. So if you're really into the detail, pause the video and just read through it real quick. All right, and with that said, let's quickly put a chart here with all the Fibonacci numbers. you can just Google Fibonacci numbers, or if you are like eager to do math, you can even calculate them yourself. But here we have a chart. And now what I'll do, again, as a reminder, I turned on the view here and the object dimensions. I toggled this on so we always see how wide and how high the objects actually are. And I want this block to be, for example, 144 wide and 89 tall. Then it will be a Fibonacci ratio, or I should say a golden ratio. And now we also want to have the text size aligned to that ratio if possible. So we can do 21, and that's actually nice because we have space for 2 lines of text and we don't need much more words anyways. We want to have it this short. So in this way we have a great ratio and the text looks nice and big. And so that's roughly how we want to have this. And now because we will have other things than just these blocks aligned to the Fibonacci numbers, we also want to have the spacing and other things. We should have some helpers. And I'll show you what I mean by helpers. And so let's start, for example, with a square with 21 by 21, which is already a Fibonacci number like this. And then we'll draw a second one, which is 34 by 34. We make sure they are the same dimensions vertically and horizontally. And then we do 55 by 55. And now you'll already notice something interesting. Now here, this 55, that's the property of Fibonacci number. This is the same as this plus this. So they align very nicely here. And then the next one is 89. And to get to 89, we can just align it here. And you'll see it's 89 by 89. And sometimes there is a rounding error. So this is now 88, but it should be 89. So we can just fix it like this. And then 144, like this. Yeah, and if I press shift, it will roughly work. But if it doesn't, then I can also not press shift and make sure these numbers are correct here. That's more important. And then let's drag all of them down and do one last one, which will be 233. Yeah, again, you see, because of the rounding, it doesn't work perfectly, but I can now fix it 233, and this should also be 233. Well, here it's worth spending some time to get it totally correct. And because the magnetic effect is an issue here, let's make it smaller. 233. So this way, now we'll draw this one up. And you see, even though we made it 1 pixel smaller, still the alignment guides show up on top and on the bottom. So that means we're still exactly in the right shape. And these are all the sizes we'll need. We'll not need any more. All right, so here we are with a new totally blank slate. And what we'll start is by just making the first new block, like so. And we'll make sure we have the width according to this 144 block and the height according to this 89 block. So you see also here, this one is 144 by 89. And what you don't know yet, but turns out that the spacing between the blocks ideally is also exactly the height and the width of the blocks. And that's because if you have several blocks next to each other, like for example, you have an option where a block is below, like let's say like this, for example. Doesn't really matter what the horizontal spacing is right now, but let's just put any random value like this, and we have a connection arrow here, like so and like so. This way it works really nicely. But if we go one level down with the spacing, like so, and move them like here, this would also have a golden ratio, right? So you could say this works. But you'll notice that here now in this line, we have this kind of hiccup. And that we really don't want to. That would be kind of ugly if we have that all over the place. So the solution, if that space is too small, is we just go to the one level bigger one, and that turns out to be exactly the height of the block as well, at least in the case of 89 by 89 here. And so that's what we're going to do. And for the width, the 144, that also turns out to work quite well, because we will have this same spacing like within a block here in the lower level, but also between the blocks. And if we have it more narrow, then it gets very tight here between two different blocks, because we have the block kind of margin, or like first the padding, then some margin, and then padding, and then the next block. And for that, it's great to have enough space, which is the width of one action as well. So you'll see it later how it works very nicely. And with that in mind, let's just get started with recreating our intro block, which we'll call collect user infos. And before we redraw it, let's also consider that for this middle block, we have here 6 columns, right? And for our intro block before, we had only 4, but it was higher. So let's make sure we spread it out vertically a bit more than before, and also have it 6 blocks wide. So it will nicely have the same width with what comes below after. And then for the padding, here it's actually great to use one size smaller blocks. Yeah, and one size smaller should be this one in the case of horizontal padding. And the vertical padding is this one. And now we can just nicely move them to the right until they touch here. And these we can move up and down until they touch like so. And now we have kind of the perfect situation. So we said we have 6, so this is 1, this is spacing. We can do the space kind of different. We can do it like light gray to make it more clear as well. This is going to be number 2, but let's type that later. Let's first duplicate it a few times. So now we have 3, 4, 5, 6, plus 1 space. No, actually not a space, but another padding. And this should also be gray, because that's also not a block. And this one should also be gray. And now we can number them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we see it's exactly the right amount. And so with that said, let's create a few more here as well. And I don't have in my head right now how many I'll need, so I'll just create a few, and later we can always easily adjust and delete what we need or don't need. And so here, let's get started again. Start, greeting. We ask for the interest. We draw some more arrows. And this is now the same thing that we created last time. And you might think that I could speed up now and just talk to you again when everything is done. But what I want to do here is just take you all the way through and through my thought process, what exactly I'm doing. So if that's not something you're interested in, feel free to jump forward. Down below in the video timeline, I marked the chapters so you can easily know where the next topic begins. But if you're interested, feel free to come along and listen to my more detailed explanations as well. And here we have group lessons, private lessons, other services. This time we'll make sure we connect all the 3 arrows here, not like in my first video where I forgot that. And we'll ask for the name. Type name. That's something also that I like to do. If they have an open input field, I'll have a type as an additional word to basically have a fail-safe. So it's not only the color of the border or whatever design choice you make, but also the words that kind of doubly secure the meaning of what you're trying to say here. And it will be more obvious if you have a wrong color with the word type. And here we go on a new line now. This was down here before, but because we need more lines and this is a separate question, this is kind of a good point to move over to a new line. It's again something they type. And then they get a question if the email is correct or not. And in this case, I could also theoretically say select no or select yes. And by the way, what I just did here, if you have this shape selected and you click here, it will create a new shape. But for some reason, it doesn't really get the rounded corners, which is why I can never use this, because the square without the rounded corners doesn't really look that great. Or like, it's also okay, but rounded corners are just a better design choice. So that's why I just need to copy paste every time. And so anyways, so I could type here select, but I think because this is the default, it's also fine to have nothing and it's clear enough. And again here, if we have no as an answer, the line goes back. Yeah, I need to be careful. I can't start here on the left side. If I do that, it's going to be confusing. So I can start here on top. And then what we had here before is we had this how can we help you action. We had that question outside of all the blocks. But now we are kind of more aligning everything, and we don't want to have an individual action just outside of everything. So what we can do here is also just add it in the intro block, and that actually also helps us to get to the 6 lines now. And so we can have that question here. How can we help? And we go to one level deeper, like so. And here the answers are question, call, or nothing. Question and call or nothing. They should all be aligned. Somehow they are not, so let's make sure they are aligned with our ruler on the left, which is kind of the authority on alignment, so we can just do it this way. Now we are sure they are correct. And here now you see a mistake happened again. Somehow I lost the rounded corners, so let me just fix it. I'm kind of lazy. I'm just going to select these 3 here. And I don't want to have any alignment issues here, so let me select these 3 and this one, and then align them to the bottom. No, I don't need these. Something is an issue with the software. It keeps creating these corners, which I don't want. And so I'm just going to copy them individually now, and I hope that will work, and it does indeed. So again, the answers are question, call, or nothing. And here we are now exactly at this case that we need the whole action height as a spacing, otherwise we'd have this issue here. So that's exactly why we have this much spacing everywhere, to just still have it look nice. And here we have the issue that left side is apparently more magnetic than right side, which I hate, but I can just check it like this and then align it here, and I see it's fine. And last option is question, which we just need to connect. And then let's create our kind of block, as I called them. We just do a square shape like so, like so, like so, and we send it to the back by pressing function key and arrow down, but we need to select it correctly. And so below here we have too much gap. We don't need the fifth row actually, as we found out, so let's just delete that. but instead we need to have a smaller padding here as well. Let's have that. And now we find out something else. Do you remember we always had a title on top here? If we just add a title like this, like so, then it's ugly. We need more space here for title, right? And the way we do this, and always stay with the golden ratio, is we take one of these 34 blocks here, and then one more of these 55 blocks, and we move the whole ruler thing. We move it all up, and we increase the size of this. And by the way, this shouldn't have a red outline. Let me remove that. And now we'll also make this title to a size 34, which is the same as this size block here. And if you see only the blue box, you'll think it's bigger, but the text is actually not the blue box. See, the text is actually exactly, let's bring this one to the front, the text is exactly the right fit for here, like the letter L fits exactly in this box, right? And so that's why if we have this kind of vertically aligned, and we left align it here with the start block, this is exactly the perfect dimension for the space and the perfect padding around our title as well. Yeah. So with that, let's call this collect user infos. And here we are done with our introductory block. Now let's go with the next few blocks. And for that, to make them, I'm actually going to bring this ruler down because we'll need this to keep everything aligned. And let's just care about the width first and the height later. Remember, we have first a 2-column thing, then we have a 1-column thing, roughly like this, and then 2 again, and then, yeah, we can just copy the 1 again. And now, though, you'll notice an issue. If you just align it according to this, this kind of blocks, you'll see that the actions here directly touch at the border, which you don't want, of course. And the smooth and elegant way to resolve this now is, again, to make use of our golden ratio blocks. So let's just take them. And you'll see here, instead of, actually let's use this one, instead of this big gray 144 block, I can actually use a 55 block first here. Let's make this gray. And then on the other side as well. And now you think there is a very random gap, but it turns out this gap is actually exactly a 34 gap. So even the gap, it fits exactly with the ratio here. And this we can make an even darker color because that is not even included in the block. So now we can just move this over here and this over here. And we know now how much the padding should be. So we also just do the same on the outside. So let's kill this one and move this one over here. And so like this. And now we'll also actually align the top one to also fit with this new system. And we can just always, between these blocks where we need to have a gap, we can just include these 3 every time. Make this bigger like so. And like so. And here is the same again. And so. And so. And here as well, we don't need the right one, but yeah, we actually only need this one. And as well as the top, we align the bottom one. So now the whole width is kind of perfect. Like the intro block and the 4 body blocks, they are aligned, and the body blocks are perfectly sized and perfectly aligned with each other as well. So that's exactly what we want. And so now we basically go through the same thing that we did before in the first video, just this time we'll create it with alignment right away. We can take this ruler here and nicely enough, we can just copy it down and like let's now make space for this one. We don't need this anymore, we already aligned it, so we can pull it up. And nicely enough, we can just copy it. We have some space for the title, and this one just goes to the row number 1. And we can also fix the spacing in between the two, like, or let's say in between the intro block and in between the main body, and we'll just use the same spacing as we used horizontally, we'll also use vertically. And so we'll do it this way. And we'll also mark this one as a title block. And so now you see this spacing and this spacing are also exactly the same. So it's perfectly aligned. And the title, we can again use a size 34 and fill this in like so. Answer questions 1. Actually, let's make them all bold since they're titles. And here, yeah, this is exactly correctly aligned. That's why we have also 6 columns. Call answer questions number 2. And this is a nothing block. And then let's get started. Okay, we start with the question again. That means after they tap this button here, question, after they do that, they get prompted to actually ask a question, and they type the question, which we now call type. And then after that, there's the AI answer. This one I'll just mark it red again right away. And we can align this here with the ones above. And sorry, contact information, because that's the fallback if the AI can't answer. We can connect them. And here now, we have this choice, and then we should go down here. And if we just connect them like this, it's going to be super ugly again, right? So what I actually learned from VoiceFlow, or I just copied it from them, is that you can connect this block to this bigger block. That's what they do all the time. And it's quite obvious then that you need to start at the first one. You see now there is an unnecessary curve in here. And you could resolve this by moving this to the right until here. That's fine, but me personally, I think it's even more elegant if this block is aligned with the other blocks, and then to force this one to still go down without any bend. There is a nice trick. You just create a block that aligns here where this should go. You fix this to that block, and then you send this block back with function and arrow down. And now this block is totally invisible. Actually, you still see the outline. So let's make sure there is no outline. And now without any outline and even the same color as before, you see this block is totally invisible. And this goes nicely here. And the flow is clear that you continue here without ever interrupting the nice title. So that's a quite neat solution I find here. Then let's move on. After the AI answer, we get them the chance to answer another question. And now we see we need a few more lines. Concretely, we need 7 lines here. So let's get 3 more of them. That's number 5, 6, 7. And some padding. And we can already just make this all bigger so there is enough space. Here we need white font color, bold as well, and we move it like so. We give again yes, no options. Yes. Somehow it doesn't like to align here for whatever reason. I can always bring it closer and then it kind of aligns more. And then after it's aligned here, I just hold shift and move it over. Yes. And no. And then, because this is the first time they get the chance to have a call with us if they want as well. Yes. And now here you also notice something is wrong with the spacing. This can't be 90, it must be 89. So that already tells you, and you see it as well here in the detail, that this should be top aligned. And here let's also fix this by pulling them down and just top aligning them this way. Just like so, yes. Yeah, here it works. You see the blue line exactly matches. So now we should be good. And so here, if they don't have another question, they go to the call. If they do have another question, they go again here to this. And you also see, because this is our padding, there is enough space for this arrow to nicely stay in here. And then, so if they want to call, they go here. If they don't want to call, they go here. And they will go out from here, but that will make it later. So next, let's make our call block. And for that, they get the chance to book. And we ask them if they have any other questions. They get a chance to say yes or no. And remember, last time we had this yes block up here, and also we had this yes answer to the call. We had it up here to save space, like so. We had it like call, and then yes was here, but now we moved this call option here in the intro block. And of course we don't want to move back from here to the intro block and then out again, so it's more correct now to have it separately down here. And here as well, the yes answer is not up here, but it stays in the call block. I think it makes logically more sense. And so because they selected that they want to have a call, this first block that we had here before is no longer needed here, and we just directly send them the link where they can book a call or the information or whatever that is. And here is the same. This yes. And we do it like this. And now for the answer questions number 2, we can actually just, instead of using this, we can just copy everything here, paste it, put it in here. It nicely aligns. And we just change this to number 2, and we make these changes that is no need for here, like this call stuff. And we make them linked here. No, not here, but here. This one goes out as well. And This one goes out as well. And then we have it. Then there is just a nothing block left. Anything we should know. Then we ask them to type the input. And that's it as well. And now lastly, we only have the exit block left. And here somehow the name got lost, so let's remake that quickly. That's the answer question block 2. And for the exit block, we will just have it two kind of rows high. So we can just take this whole thing here. Actually, yeah, we can take the whole thing. The spacing, we can even put that on top here as well. Just so it's convenient and ready. We take this whole thing, we copy it down here, we take out 2 rows because we only need 2, copy it up, and then we take this gray block, and now it's super easy to get exactly the right size without any unnecessary corrections later. With this method, you will kind of get it aligned on the first try, except maybe some detail that you need to do later. And we'll send it back so this doesn't get into the way. And then we'll start with the exit blocks. Thanks. And by the way, we'll also add a title here. You'll see now we have a space here. Like so. Yeah, we can always quickly get this one here to align it perfectly. Yes, exactly. Exit. Thanks. Thanks, talk soon. Another one like this. And another thanks. And actually this one moves to the right here, and now we can just make these arrows nice and straight. And we have the end, which is even nicely on a line on its own. And goes exactly like this. Great, and that is our overall structure, how we now have blocks nicely aligned, everything according to the golden ratio, every spacing is the same, and it's ready for professional presentation if we do a few more things, but at least the creation of the flow is done with that. And so let's talk about coloring. If we look back at what we did here in the last video, we had like red, blue, yellow, and blue and red outlines. And that's not in itself a huge problem, but there are reasons why it makes sense to reduce it to one color or potentially 2 colors. But I like to prefer one. So the first reason is that it's nice for branding. Like if I have, for example, my logo here with the Swiss AI automation, then it's nice if the whole document will represent that brand by also representing it in a color, sort of. And the second thing is, if you only use one color for the document, then you can use other colors still for notes or for marking stuff, and it will be very easy to differentiate what was the original document and what is edited on top of it, and then you can, if it's also processed and edited, change it back to the original color, and in that way always keep clarity. So these are two reasons that you might want to have a simpler color profile. And there are many websites around that can help you get a color scheme. You can just Google color scheme website. And for example, in my case, if I want to have a color scheme that aligns with this, on my Mac, there is the digital color meter tool. And if you open this, you can just move your mouse over any kind of color and you'll see there is a hex code here. So in this case, you see 0xC9, 0x3b, and 0x2b. I don't know why it is 0x, to be honest. I never used that 0x. But the numbers after C9, 3b, and 2b, that's the color code that represents this color. And so if you have this code and you enter it into any of many color matching websites, you get color schemes. And so what I got, for example, is this one. I just took a screenshot. And then these are all colors that I can use for my flowchart. And actually you can also get complementary colors. Like let's say you're using blue, but you really want to have also yellow. Then you can also get blues and yellows that match very well together. But if I just want to have one color, I can choose this one. And then I can just select matching options for my shapes from this. And so before I'm actually going to really start changing, I'll make some extra space for my legend. Remember, we had a legend down here on the bottom left. Now with this chart, we don't really have free space. You could try to squeeze it in here, but then you sort of need to cut a corner. So I'm going to argue that you just either put it at the bottom or at the top. And I want people to see it first, not first look at the document, get confused and then search for it, but I want them to have the understanding first. So I'll put the legend actually on top. And so we'll make space, not like that. And so we'll make space just like this. And again, this is just one row high. So let's have all of this selected, including the spacing. Copy, paste. That's one too much. We don't need this gray one here. And also we don't need all of these rows 2 to 4. So we can just push this down, push this down as well, and that should exactly work. Now we copy paste this one, function key down to send it back. And we should have exactly the right proportion. And we can call this either legend or explanation or whatever we want. I'll call it explanation, for example. And then I'll start here by inserting the shapes that I want. And actually I just noticed I made a mistake. This one doesn't need to be here, of course. It's unnecessary. So let's kill this. Let's move everything down. This one down. This one down, and the whole thing goes down as well. And so, yeah, and on the left side, this should actually also be this kind of spacing. Doesn't really matter, but to make it totally correct, actually we don't need a spacing here. And this one also we don't need. Sorry, too much spacing. There is nothing on top and nothing on the left as well, so it doesn't matter. And so anyways, for the start and end, traditionally we use a pill shape. And this one I'm actually going to do in this graph. And if we go to all shapes here, we have the pill here. It's called Terminator even. That's fittable, I guess. We have always 21, which is a Fibonacci number. So let's also go with 21 here. So we align with the golden ratio. We take away this border, and we'll also, this was yellow last time, but let's just make it red. And actually, because we now have our brand color, we don't need to just pick any random red, but instead we want to have our brand red. And the way I'm going to do it is by clicking on the background color and this plus icon, and then I have here a color meter. So I click on this, and now I can just measure what exactly is this red, click, and now this is exactly the right color that I want. I still need to change my font to white, make this whole thing bold, and I'm also going to call it start/end. and in this case I'll capitalize it, and then we can left align it. Yeah, so actually we need to fix the size first because this is a new shape, so it's not exactly the right size. We can both align it on the left and look at the number. So 89, that is perfect for the height. Then for the width, here we align it left, and here we also, this should be 144, I guess. Let's check. We can always check our Fibonacci here. Yes, 144, that is perfect. And we go on with the AI response. Here we now notice quite clearly that this is the wrong red. So let's also use it. And if you use it once, it's actually stored here. Now, however, I have so many similar reds that I'm not totally sure, not 100% sure that is correct. So I'm just going to use the color meter again, just to be sure. No, not for the gray, but for the red, you need to press S to get out of it. And now I can just copy this one. And it's also already going to be the right size if I do that. Yes. Then let's move this to the right. And for my AI assistant text, I want this to be gray. So let's make this to our gray. And now you see this clashes with the background. But actually, I think this background is too strong anyways. So let's actually instead change the background color. And we'll change it to this color here. It's almost white, but it has a slight red tone. So the whole document will have this feel that it fits into the design without people even really noticing that this is a red. Because you wouldn't actually know that this is red if no one told you. It's also like, if you go on the Apple website, that's really interesting, you should try. I'm not going to make this video even longer, but if you go on the Apple website and you use the color meter tool and measure how the whites look, if they have a blue phone, the white around it will have a slight blue tone. And I don't mean just nearby, the whole box will be slightly blue. And if it's a red product, the whole box will be slightly red. So this kind of color trick that you don't notice, it's used really often and on the most professional websites like Apple. So definitely nothing wrong with that. And so let's not make any changes, but just continue. The first thing we have is user options. This I want to be white again, and I want to have a border though. This is a black border. This is a bit thick now, so let's push this. Let's have just one. Because all the colors and all the design elements are weaker, we can also just have thinner lines than we had before. We don't need 3 pixel lines anymore for this to become visible. And also it's because overall the size of the boxes, if you compare, is smaller. This was what we had before compared to what we have now. So of course for smaller boxes, then you can also have thinner borders and it will still not look that thin. And then for the user free input, this one will just make the outline red and we'll just use our signature red again from my brand. And actually I'm going to add one more thing here that's not strictly necessary, but to even more emphasize the power for our AI answer, I'm going to add another block that we didn't put in before. And that's exactly this document block here, which symbolizes that data is coming in from somewhere. And I'm going to put this because I want to show that my bot uses a knowledge base. And so I'm just going to have this one, have a black outline, like so, a black outline. No, let's fill. Here's the outline, yes. Perfect, also 1 pixel. And the width will match it here. The height will also match it. And we'll call this one data input. This we don't need. And so now you see we have all the categories, and even the category explanation is nicely spaced and everything is ready. Now we just need to quickly update all our elements. Remember from last time we can use Command Option C and then Command Option V. Actually the start is here first, so let's do that. That's wrong. Start, Command Option. Yeah, in this case, if we just use Command Option C and Command Option V, we actually only copy the style. But for Miro, this pill shape is not a style, it's a totally different thing. So for that, we'll actually just copy the whole thing. Like so. Start. And because we are already at it, let's also just do it for the end so we won't forget it. And now this is like, we don't want to just delete this, otherwise we have to draw all the arrows again. So the smarter way to do it is to first move the arrows. I mean, it's a small deal, it won't make that big of a difference, but still, if you can do, then just move them. And now we are ready to remove them, or remove this thing without any issue. We align it, and we align it, and end is also there. So all of these are done. The AI answers are done. Let's continue with the assistant text, just like so. And this is also text. And then in all these blocks we have text here, 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 this one, that one, here, here, and here. And then also down here, that is also AI assistant text. And then let's go to the user options and copy this style. That's basically all these things here, and everywhere there is a yes or no. Also the three main dialog options. This one is not, this is an open input. Now it helps also that we have the word type. That also shows already obviously where it's not a choice thing. And then we have type, Shift Command C. Here they type the name, type the email. This is a capitalization mistake. Type the question, type the question, type the input. These two we forgot. And here, what is this? This is just a text, so it's gray. And then lastly, the data input. So this I just want to put here wherever we have an AI answer to show that we use data. And I'm going to put this here. I'm going to call it knowledge base. And here is something you need to consider. We can't draw this arrow here. This will be super messy. All right, but even if we draw the arrow like this, it's not very clear how the arrows flow now. It could be that this arrow flows like this somehow, or this arrow somehow flows like this, I don't know. So what we'll do here, we'll go to type and we'll use line jumps. And if you use that, you get this kind of nice little gate, and now it's super obvious that this line flows this way and the other line kind of goes below this one. So that's a neat other small trick. And we do exactly the same here. Align it, fix it, and that was the knowledge base. And so now looks like we are done with step 4. Let's take one last look. Yes, looks all good. And now lastly, let's add some final touches. And actually, first thing we need to add as well is a title. It's not really a final touch. Ideally, you would have done that in the beginning. But anyways, we're doing it now. And so for the title, we have these headings here that are 34. So we'll just do the logical thing and jump from 34 to 55 in terms of title size. And we'll also do the other logical thing. And because they have a 55 spacing, that means it's quite reasonable for us for a title now to use a 89 spacing. So everything is kind of proportional, right? And so we'll have these. And then we'll just have another text, which is going to be 55, like so. And we are again going to call it AI Assistant for Language Schools, or yeah, fair enough. And we align it in the middle here. And we bring these up here. Great. And then the next thing we also want to do as a final touch is we want to add a footnote. That's kind of my personal preference, but I really like to do that because then I can add some other information that I want to be in my document, but I don't want that to kind of shout out at everyone too much. And here we could do it in a 34, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it even one smaller and take this 21, just Command X and paste it in here, 21, like so, and another spacing block. And then I'm going to get some text, which is going to be 21, and the type of footnote I want is first my URL, swissaiautomation.com, semicolon, then I'll add my name, Gregor Schafroth. Then that's kind of not really necessary, but to give it some more authenticity, I'll also add my location, which is Olten, Switzerland. And lastly, I'll just add the date of today as well, which is the 3rd of Feb of 2024. And now it's a footnote, so I'll not make it bold. I'll make it italic instead. And also I'll give it kind of a gray color. And we can check which gray color is the best one. Yeah, this is too light, so I'll go with this one. So it's still readable, but people will only notice this if they're really looking for it. And so we'll align this here as it should be first, and we will right align it with this block here. That's exactly how we want it. And now also on the top of the whole thing we want to have this. No, we already have the top spacing. This is an outer spacing here. This is also nothing spacing. And so is this one supposed to be here. And we also want that on the right side. And we have it below already. And now we are ready for a frame as well. So let's press button F. And in this case, we can't choose a frame with a nice proportion. So let's just be honest and choose the custom frame. No need to do anything about it. And we'll just nicely put it in this corner here on the top left. And pull it all the way down to the bottom right. Make sure this aligns. And this aligns. And yeah, we can give the frame a name as well. AI Assistant for Language Schools. And that is it. Now, you saw I made this live with you and I saw some small mistakes. So I'll definitely, if that is my real work that I present to my client, I'll definitely look through the whole flow one more time and I'll notice things. Like for example here, there are obviously arrows missing and probably there are some capitalization issues or other small issues. So what I'll do is I'll go through it one more time after everything is done, like now. Then I'll let some time pass and I'll look at it again with some time difference, like 10 minutes later, hours later, or even the next day if you don't have any time pressure. And if it's super important and you have friends or colleagues who are available, it's also a great idea to let them check because they have a different way to look at things and they might see things that you just overlooked that are super obvious. And maybe now you looking at this, you think, Gregor, why don't you fix this thing that looks so obviously wrong, but I just don't see it, right? Some people might, for example, look at this and say, this text is so close to the side here, there is an issue, something needs to be changed here. I think personally that's okay, just for saying. Other people might have different opinions, and by collecting them you can make sure the document is as good as possible. So what we did here first is we looked at the macro design patterns. We now have the introduction on top, the body in the middle, and the exit on the bottom, not as before where we had a kind of random L shape. We looked at the micro design. We have everything in golden ratio with Fibonacci numbers. We also created the flowchart inside of these micro and macro considerations. We have a professional color scheme where everything is aligning with this signature red, and you should of course use your own color. And we added several final touches by putting in footnote, title, and knowledge base. And all of this, as you see, takes quite a bit of time. And if you're doing it the first time, it might take even more time. But if you are having a client that's sort of on the edge and your professional impression might make a difference, this type of preparation can be worth it. All right, now if you want to access this as a template, like I promised you in the beginning of part 1 of this series, you can just click the link in the video description down below and you should be able to open this. Also, what I would recommend to you, if you make this file or have this as a template, then to share it, at first save a copy so you have this template, and then you don't want to share all these ruler blocks, right? These are just useful to make the whole stuff. But you want to delete them, and just to show you how that would work, you then have sort of this thing, right, without the whole ruler. And then, because this is so tall, this will now, if you take a screenshot of this whole thing, like so, this will not look very well. It will have a very bad resolution. So what you can do is instead zoom in, and then just take screenshots of different sections, and then actually it will make sense to either connect them or even put them on different pages if that's something that you share in kind of pages logic, right? And design choice here as well is if you want to have these grid lines around. So you can just go here to the settings, to view grid, and you can select none at all if you don't want to have this. That might be more aesthetic. I also think the grid actually looks kind of cool, so personally I would probably just leave it on, yeah. And if I was to use that for myself, I'd of course also add the logo up here, but since I'm going to share that as a template, I'll not do that right now. And that was it. Alright, this was part 3, and with that the final part of how I use Miro flowcharts to design my AI assistants. As you saw, this is quite tedious, and maybe you don't need every element of what I just did here with every flowchart. Sometimes it's totally fine to be quick and dirty, but in other moments it might also make a difference to have a great design. So now with these 3 videos you have all the tools that you need to create professional looking flowcharts. In my next video, I'll show you how I use VoiceFlow to create exactly that AI assistant that we drafted here today, also including the knowledge base. And in more videos after that, I'll look at iterations and changes that we can make to make this AI assistant even more useful and functional. So if that's interesting to you, I'd really appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.